It's interesting, everybody in this room has a vested interest in education. And one of the things that I find tremendously interesting about education in general is that, in the U.S., we're looking at trying to create students and give them opportunities to enter a world where they need to be problem solvers, they need to be creative, and they need to be able to think out of the box. Well, my question is, why do we do all of our educating in a box? We sit in classrooms with these segmented 49-minute periods if you go to my high school. And, you might transition from taking calculus 1 minute to reading Shakespeare the next to learning about the Holocaust in your third period class. And we expect somewhere along the line that our students are going to connect these dots. And maybe that's a process that happens in college, or maybe it's through real-world experience. But I think maybe that's part of the reason that we're having so many issues in the world today, is that because we have a lot of people running around with disconnected dots. We teach people these individual pieces of knowledge, but we don't actually give them an opportunity to put them into play. And so, my background, and to kind of go back to the sandals thing, I actually was the wilderness instructor for a long time. I lived outside and I traveled around the world leading kids on trips. And I've been educating for about 10 years now. And I have relatively recently, probably in comparison to other people at this table, come into public schools. And part of what I saw in all of those travels and all of the different organizations and schools that I worked for was that there was something in these independent programs that was cultivated that was direly missing in public schools. My parents both taught for over 30 years in public schools, and so that was a really, I always kind of thought that might be the direction that I would end up going. But it was through all these other experiences, and many of them were really expensive experiences that weren't affordable to most families, that I found that there were some serious things were missing in public education. And so a few years back, I made the decision to go back to school to get a master's degree and to work in public schools. And since that time, I've been lucky to inherit an alternative program. And for those of you in the state of Vermont who know anything about alternative programs, there's not really a lot of direction that anybody can give you. It mostly is kind of this convenient way to deal with those kids. And so a lot of times, that's who I'm working with. I'm working with kids who don't fit in very well in a traditional school setting. For whatever reason, maybe it's behavioral, maybe it's academic, maybe it's social, they're just struggling. And so we're looking for ways not only to get them to, take the ass back when that eventually comes out and do well, but to just care about their education, about themselves, about the world that they're entering into. And so one of the biggest things that we emphasize is student investment, student engagement. And one of the vogue terms in education right now is this concept of a flipped classroom. And honestly, I think that what we really need is a flipped education system. What I think is that by getting kids into the world and connected with their communities, it gives them a great opportunity to practice all of those skills that are going to be necessary as they enter their professional careers, whatever that might look like. And I don't think you can really adequately do that in a classroom. Personally, some of the foundations of the program that I work with are service learning. We do a lot of project-based and problem-based learning. These are kids who have a hard time connecting to their high school or to their local community, so we really emphasize not only our internal community, but also the surrounding community. And we've worked really hard to cultivate a curriculum that addresses all of these needs and really tries to find ways to get our kids engaged. Personally, I'm really interested in quantifying what is working in my program, because I think that what we're doing is pretty innovative, and I think it's a testament to maybe the direction that education could go, to show that it doesn't just work for some kids, but it really does work for all kids. Quote that actually in 1 week, or I guess 6 days from today, that I'm going to share with each of my students on the first day of school is from Ralph Waldo Emerson, and it's that the greatest gift that anybody can bestow upon humanity is their own self-awareness. And something that I think is really missing in this world of ours and in education in general is that kids don't have much awareness. They might have an idea of what they want to do, but if you ask most kids why they need an education, it's to go to college. And if you ask them, well, why do you want to go to college? They say to get a good job. And you ask them why you want to get a good job, and they say, well, to make a lot of money. And I think that that's kind of unfortunate, that people have such a limited scope of like what they gain from their educational experience. And so, for me, the direction that I try to work with my kids is trying to understand what they have to offer the world around them. And we do that through a variety of experiences that they don't get elsewhere. Our kids go out on backpacking trips, and last year we took kids hiking 4 miles into a cabin, and they carried in big buckets of paint and painted over the graffiti from years and years of people abusing that space. They developed their own service learning projects. So currently we're developing a 5K course for our school forest that is going to be used by the cross-country team, and also partner with the college cross-country team in the area that we're working in. And these are projects that they're the ones they're deciding that this is what they're interested in doing for their community and for themselves. And what I've seen with that process is it's changed my perspective on teaching. I'm no longer the person who's standing up there and giving this information out in little parcels to kids, but I'm really becoming a resource and an expert at knowing what the local resources are, so I can point my kids in those directions. And I think that that's really the direction that education is heading. It's an honor and a privilege to be here today. If I were to be selected, I think the biggest message that I would have is that I think it's time that education stop being reactive to all of the pressures that are coming from so many different places. And the reason that everybody wants a hand in what's happening in education is because it's powerful. It's a way to influence the future. It's a way to influence the youth. It's a way to dictate what our future looks like as a nation, as a people. And for that reason, I think that what we really need to emphasize is, we're the professionals, and we need to be innovative. I agree with many of the thoughts that these ladies have had, just in terms of opening up our doors to the public and providing resources for the public beyond just the kids that are in there. And so my hope would be that by continuing to share the work that we do in my program, the work of my students, that in the future the direction that education goes in general is towards a more innovative, experiential, and life-based program in which all kids have an opportunity to really understand who they are and what they do have to offer to the world.